10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0.
To make a very long story short, I'm the last person that I ever thought that would be standing in front of a group of subject matter experts and real life cyber heroes like this. But I guess God has a sense of humor, and you know, here I am. One of the first things that I came to understand about business and about human relationships is not so much what people do, it's why we do what we do. So this is our mission, to shine the light on the unsung heroes who toil in anonymity to keep us safe. Because the only time people hear about cybercrime or hacking is when the black hats win. So if you'll go along with me, I want to give all of you a round of applause for yourself. Thank you for what you do. Well, you got to do it. Come on, everybody. This is going to be a high energy thing. There you go. Thanks for playing along. It's true, and I've had the privilege over the last 2.5 years to listen to thousands of global cybersecurity experts. Because when I first suffered the things that I'm going to tell you about, I had no idea what was happening. And so I know what I'm speaking about when I say thank you to all of you unsung heroes. So I'm going to talk to you about these 4 points, a view from the C-suite, a little bit about what happened in my case, and then, you know, I just kind of thought of myself as the Forrest Gump of cybersecurity, because I just kind of bump into these incredible people in these unusual situations, of which I'll share a couple with you. Then I made this big pivot, you know, that Jeff just talked about, because being a victim is exhausting. Being an advocate is empowering. I'm just going to feed off of all of your energy, and that's how I get stronger and stronger, as you'll see as we go through this. And I'll talk to you a little bit about the future. So I had a company that Jeff told you about. It was a very successful marketing company. I was lucky enough to sell a part of it to the largest marketing company in the world. I had these big clients, and it was going great until I learned, after I had a near-death injury that caused me to be out of my own company for an extended period of time, during which time a small group of my trusted employees, or so I thought, actually started their own company while working for us full-time, and they created a shadow entire company without us having any idea that this was happening. So we noticed that our revenue was kind of slowly going down, but I kind of attributed to the fact that I was, you know, the main rainmaker of our company, but boy, was I wrong. So they, amongst other things, called our biggest clients, saying that there's fraud in our data collection operation, and that I was under investigation by the FBI. They pretended to be whistleblowers and called my biggest client saying to cease all communications. They redirected telephones so that when someone would call my office, it would go to their company. They spoofed our website, and as you'll see in a little bit, I lost everything. This was my house, the mansion that I lived in. You know, I was never very materialistic, but I went kind of crazy. So here's the first takeaway: don't do that. There. Is it worthwhile for you? And so this is my bank account a little bit over 3 years ago. Can anyone just holler out what's in the lower right-hand corner? I had 1 penny to my name. Now let's just stop a minute. Let that sink in. I was a multimillionaire, speaker all around the United States, giant clients, incredible reputation, and I lost everything. So what do you do? What does a person do? And unfortunately, being a victim, as I said a little bit earlier, is not a way to spend your life. But I did. I went through all these stages. I was as angry as a person can get. I was as scared as you can possibly imagine if you're being attacked with 19 attack vectors at work and at home. There were 36 people listening to my conversations through OnStar in my car. So I'm going to show you a little bit about that. So the first thing I noticed is I gave a keynote speech, and the very next day, my ex-employees must have been in the audience or they heard about it, but my LinkedIn was hacked. And it was a very simple thing. It was a URL redirect. And I noticed that the number of contacts just went down from 584 to 719. And of course, I use two-factor authentication because that's something I learned. But take a look at the letters on top of that 2FA. It's just gibberish. They spoofed LinkedIn 2FA. You would think LinkedIn is pretty good at security, but in this case, something happened. So I called a cybersecurity firm, and I didn't have a lot of money. It was going to be around $10,000 for about 2 weeks of analysis and things like that. And I said, well, I only have $1,000. And thank goodness, that was my first interaction with folks like you here in this room, the good people, the helpers of the world. And they helped me put together a 3-page summary. And it says here that there's a 90% chance that I was the victim of a man-in-the-middle attack. And we later learned a little bit about that. There are these devices called pineapples which spoof Wi-Fi. So here are just a couple pictures. I took photographs of some of the evidence because I knew no one would believe me. I mean, do you believe me so far? Round of applause if you believe me so far. Okay, thank you. You should be skeptical. So was I. I had no idea. So I went on a torrent starting at 4 a.m. every day for 6 months trying to rebuild my life by understanding what had happened. So here's a Bluetooth vulnerability. You know, what does that mean? Every IoT device is hackable because of the encryption methodology used within the Bluetooth, because it needs to search out different devices so it can pair. So here's Google two-factor authentication. You would think, you know, they'd be pretty good at this, and this is correct. It's got a masked 5-digit number on top and what are referred to as single-use authentication tokens. That's correct. Here's the one that I was working on. It had a 10-digit phone number on top that was spoofed, and you'll see the same code was used every single time. But as a person, a regular person who's not in cybersecurity, there's no chance I would have noticed it until I noticed it. This is an interesting hack that originally began with a Mac peripheral, like a FireWire kind of a thing, called Thunderbolt, which is a legitimate functionality within the Mac operating system. But beneath the Mac operating system is Unix, and that's accessed by other methods. And that's where a lot of the damage was happening to all my stuff. So they had a sense of humor and put actual lightning bolts on my screen, but it was up for just a nanosecond. I later learned that's really not what it was for. It was to tell them they had control over my systems. It was a signal. So here's GoDaddy, you know, user interface that any of you use GoDaddy? Just round of applause. Anyone? A few? Okay. So this is the correct user interface that you can see here, and this is the one I was logging in on. Just take a moment and look at all the different things that were actually incorrect. But if you're in the course of doing business, or you're doing something at home, or your children are doing something at school, there's no way you're going to notice it, and that's phishing. Norton VPN. You think they would be pretty good at it. So this is a correct user interface. Here's the one that I was logging in on. There was no on and off toggle switch. This is from Lehman Buick down here in South Florida, because I noticed my GPS was wobbly, and it was a new car, maybe 6 months old. So I decided to take it to Lehman Buick and tell them that. And I said, look, I know a little bit about cybersecurity. Maybe you can check or do a system reset or something. And the head service guy took it into the bay. So about 30 minutes later, he comes out and gets me in the customer service area, and his face was ashen white. And he said, sir, can you follow me? I'm going like, what? Like, is everything okay? He's just follow me. Okay. So I go into the service bay, and my car was on one of the lists, but it was on the ground. He says, can you get in the passenger side? So I did, having no idea what he's talking about. And so I got in, and then he says to this guy, ma'am, can you please repeat what you just said? And I'm looking, I'm like, what? And all of a sudden, this voice came out of OnStar and told us what had happened, that there were 36 connections through my OnStar account. So I asked them if they could document it, and they did, because I had to try to get some evidence, that could be used for law enforcement. And one of the amazing things about law enforcement as it pertains to technology is they're incredibly well intended. And they really, really try to do a good job, but they are under-resourced. And all this technology is happening a little bit too fast for our law enforcement and for the judicial system around it. So unable to receive justice, I decided to make this pivot to become the Forrest Gump of cybersecurity. And round of applause if any of you have taken a SANS course. S-A-N-S? Some of you are into that, yeah. So I heard there was a SANS course here in Miami. I didn't really look them up or anything. I just showed up. And basically within 30 minutes, I said, I'm sorry, I can't stay. And thank God I didn't pay. And any of you who've been to SANS, like, you know what I'm talking about. It's very intensive and you really have to know what you're doing. But I didn't quit. I bought a book called Cybersecurity for Dummies. Round of applause if any of you have seen the Dummy series about anything, right? So that's what I thought. Okay, perfect. Cybersecurity for Dummies. And I was super optimistic. And finally, I got a hold of a copy of it and I started reading it. And I had my little yellow highlighter. And 10 pages in, I was lost. In a book called Cybersecurity for Dummies. So rather than quitting, I eventually found the author, who was a very important person in the cybersecurity ecosystem. And I told him that. I said, sir, 10 pages in, I was lost. And he busted out laughing. I mean, like crying laughing. So I'm a funny guy, so I just started laughing. And finally, I said, can I ask why you're laughing? And he goes, well, it's not really for beginners. Are you kidding me? Then why do you call it Cybersecurity for Dummies? I asked. And that's when I realized there had to be a better way to distill complicated information into something that 99.9% of people can get their hands around who are not in technology or cybersecurity, or anybody who wants to protect their daughter from the prying eyes of a webcam. So I started listening to podcasts until my ears, couldn't hear anymore. Hundreds and hundreds of hours of listening and learning, listening and learning. Well, here was my other source of power. So any of you have the lanyards that you have on right now? Can you just take it and put your hand on it and say this with me? I have cyber power. Say it. Yes, you do, because you have it around your neck and you're here. Here's a clue. When smart people get together, good things happen. And I'm the beneficiary of some of the smartest people in the world in cybersecurity. And I'll explain how that came about. For example, here's Secretary Nielsen, who just recently retired about 6 months ago or so from the Department of Homeland Security. Why would I possibly be in proximity with her, and why would she want one of my comics? Well, I decided to change my life. And so I decided to work out, and I've lost around 30 pounds. Round of applause for that, please. That was not easy. But I can't even get away from this stuff. Look closely at the name of the machine. Can someone holler it out? Cybex. I can't even work on something called Life Cycle or whatever. So I'm working out on a Cybex machine. And I'm really proud to say that after several years, we've been featured in a book called Transformational Security Awareness. So we're doing something right. So here's, part of my big pivot. I was in Abu Dhabi and Dubai last week. Anybody been there? Round of applause. Anybody? If you have not, you have to go. It is life-changing how beautiful it is and how different it is than at least my perception of what things were like in that part of the world. It was just absolutely magnificent. And a big consulting company hired my firm to create a custom comic book. And that was a real privilege for a bunch of reasons. The first being that I had to listen and learn about the culture. How do you depict a woman in a costume like this? What are the physical proxemics? What are the stories? Is there cyber crime? Or not? Are there other forms of crime, or are they not? So I had the privilege of listening and learning to incredibly smart people, and we launched this last week in Dubai, Abu Dhabi rather. So here are a few pictures, from that. That's my sidekick, Olivier. We're under the Amir's photograph. This is a group of wonderful Arab people doing sword dances, to kind of welcome us. We're at their main mosque, and was amazing to just see the code, of dress and no shorts and head coverings, and I just had this extraordinary feeling of privilege to be in proximity to such great people that I knew just absolutely nothing about. So what I'm going to do now is share with you a little bit of a recap. It only lasts about 1 minute, and then we'll continue.
Gentlemen, please welcome to the stage the cyber hero.
Round of applause. Thank you. Are you enjoying this guy Gary Berman's speech? I heard he's pretty good. Round of applause if he is. All right, rock and roll. Yeah, so glad to be here. I'm the cyber hero. I was wounded right here in my chest, if you look real closely, because that's where my heart was. And I recovered, and now here we are. So, round of applause for my sidekick. So, as I was saying earlier, the source of my superpower are all of you in the cybersecurity technology community. So, here's how I get it. All right. So, these are the conferences I've been at. Round of applause for that. Yeah. And so, one of the interesting things that I've learned about all this is this notion of phishing. And so phishing is when you get someone to click on a link and then they can work within your systems and just wreak havoc. So I'm going to see if I can get anyone with phishing here. Oh, look, I have a bank! I have a bank! Whoa. All right, round of applause for my fish. So we have a little medal. So read what this says, just real loud. I don't have my glasses. He doesn't have his glasses. Sidekick.
It's time to be a hero.
All right, rock and roll. Round of applause for our first hero. All right, thanks a lot. Yeah, so other than this, nothing going on. So I'm going to show you a few pictures of Cyber Week, which I was at last week, and we interacted with almost 2,000 people, and I think it's pretty safe to say that I'm probably the only person in the history of the Middle East that has put capes and masks on women in burqas. And they loved it. So one of the cool things about this experience for me was the universality of the inner child, right? Everybody has an inner child. Round of applause if you have an inner child. And those of you who are not applauding, just come and take a photo and I'll bring it out with you. So the next day, after this extraordinary series of 5 days, my sidekick and I flew to Dubai, Abu Dhabi rather, for 5 days and interacted with little kids, teenagers, adults, business people. Each day was a little bit different in terms of the audience, and like everyone just loves comics. But it was amazing because they're not accustomed to expressing themselves in the same way that we do here in the West. So I would ask the women, you know, I'd go, Wonder Woman, and then I'd have them stand like this, you know, or other people, okay, you know, get into a power position. From what I've been told, that kind of has never happened, and I'm not sure I'll be invited back. So, but that night, I saw these Russian dancers, which, you know, I thought was quite unusual because I was in the Emir's palace. The event took place in the Emir's former palace, this massive, massive, you know, giant, beautiful place with gold fixtures everywhere, gold leaf everywhere. It was incredibly ornate. And then I saw this Russian exhibit. There were also these big Russian dolls, you know, that stack inside one another, but big giant ones, like 10 feet tall. And then there was a scene of like Russian peasants, you know, weaving in bales of hay. I'm going, wow, you know, this is quite a testament, to, you know, to that. And so I found out why. Talk about Forrest Gump. I was in the epicenter of a massive tectonic geopolitical shift in the world. What am I doing there? It gets even more interesting because I was cleared by security to be in the conference the day he was going to be there, possibly to meet him in costume. So I could not sleep all night. And I called my wife, I don't know what time it was locally, but I told her, I said, you know, I was a little unsettled and a little scared, given everything that's going on in the world. You know, I wasn't sure what to do. So like a trooper, I had my costume in a bag, you know, the laundry bag from the hotel, and said, okay, I'm gonna do it. You know, we're on a mission. And so went downstairs, my sidekick was already ready to go, and I did like this little check. I said to him, what do you think? I didn't sleep all night. I'm a little nervous about going to possibility of meeting him and getting a picture of me. Because in my work here in the States, I deal with the military, the Department of Defense, National Institute of Standards and Technology, the FBI, NSA, and many other people because they love our comics. And it's an easy way for them to get their heads around stuff. And so, round of applause if you think I met President Putin. I appreciate that, but I didn't. I just couldn't do it. You know, I had a deep sense of pride, you know, of you know, being an American. And I mean, think about this. You know, why should I be thinking about this stuff? Halfway around the world. That's why I refer to myself as Forrest Gump. So anybody play chess here? Round of applause, yeah? You know Gary Kasparov? So I met him too, and the reason he signed an autograph for me is because amongst other things now, kind of part-time, I'm a cybersecurity reporter for Cyber Defense Magazine. And I go to conferences and things like that, and I report on cybersecurity. So besides getting in free, which is super cool, I go to the VIP areas, and everyone wants to talk to me because everyone wants press for whatever it is they're there for. So it's been an incredible, you know, door opening to the most senior people in the world in cybersecurity and geopolitical stuff. Okay, this guy is, wait for it, the real James Bond. He was head of MI6. Anybody know what MI6 is? I mean, I didn't, but I do now. That's their intelligence agency, and he was the head. He even looks the part, doesn't he? Very handsome, James Bond looking guy. So in order to try to explain this to my wife and the incredible nature of this experience, I brought back some artifacts and I covered them in sort of an Arabian, you know, tablecloth kind of a thing, and this is what it looks like. So I brought back, you know, copies of the newspapers, you know, talking about current events, and copies of our comic, and you know, coffee pots and stuff, and she really loved it. And by the way, yeah, I know this is on tape, but I love you, Valerie. Thank you for putting up with me for all of these years. Round of applause for Valerie. Come on, she deserves it. No, everyone, come on, or your own wives if you want. I mean, can you imagine being part of this? Yeah, everybody thought I was nuts, which I might be, but not about the evidence or things like that. So I had to do a big pivot from victim to advocate, and I had to learn about comics. And anybody been to a Comic-Con or any event like that? Yeah, it's incredible, just the sensory overload, but the passion, and the love and the joy that people have and the work and the effort they put in to create these alter egos was just magical. I also had to learn how to tell stories. It's not easy, it turns out, and I didn't have any particular skill or acumen for storytelling, but it's kind of a secret sauce to be able to distill complicated technology information into superhero comics. So I had to listen and learn about comics itself. So I went to the source, Stan Lee, rest in peace, and I started learning about how they do things. Which is very different than actually getting them done. But this is the result, kind of pre and post, our listening and learning. And we launched our first edition about a year and a half ago. We're now on our third edition and our first coloring book and our first animation. So this is what it looks like a little bit. The stories are all real life stories of cybercrime, answering 3 questions. What happened? What were the consequences? And most importantly, what were the lessons learned for possible inclusion in the comic? And the reason I got in touch with all the folks in the ecosystem is I put a cover of my comic on my LinkedIn page. At the time I had around 500 or 600 connections, and I started inviting CSOs one at a time to connect with me and asking them to please send me real life blinded stories. Last time I checked, about a week ago, I have 21,850 connections with the most important people in the world. They have become subscribers to my comic too, which is amazing. Round of applause for that. Yeah. So these are some of the cyber heroes. Queen Geo. Half my characters are women because there aren't enough women in this ecosystem, and I've learned all about that. They're very diverse characters. Yeah, they're very diverse characters: Hispanics, African Americans, Asians, veterans in wheelchairs, and things like that. So here are a couple of our characters, and I'm going to honor the presenter here, which is a new character, and she's based on PowerPoint, and she's going to be in our next edition. Can anyone just sort of holler out, what would the presenter's superpower be? She's a good one. She's a hero. Can anyone guess? Puts people to sleep. PowerPoint, hello? Are you still with me, or is she here? Oh, come on, man, don't. That'll kill me. So how do you anthropomorphize hacks? They're just ones and zeros. You can't see them. So we came up with these characters. You heard about ransomware earlier. Wilbur WannaCry is the name of an attack. WannaCry affected the British healthcare system and then went way beyond that. And so we just started, creating characters that people of all ages can relate to. So our characters are 9th grade level. That's how we communicate. Phoebe the Fisher. You'll notice the little subtleties too, like she has a big harpoon. That's for what's called whales. So when someone targets a CEO or C-level person, they also have spear when someone targets a specific person, and then general fishing, which is just casting a wide net, so to speak. And Sonny the social engineer, which is always a problem. Social engineering, it's part of what happened to me. Ivan the ID thief, Randall the remote access Trojan. So here's what's next. We're working on healthcare, and that's unbelievably important because it's life or death. We're going to be doing 14 more editions based on the Department of Homeland Security critical infrastructure designations. So healthcare, telecommunications, information technology, automotive transportation, so on and so forth. And so even though it's comics and animations, the substance is real and the kinds of things that various stakeholders want to communicate. So these are our subscribers now. You can see who they are. We have over 8,000 C-level people. I laugh as I'm saying that, but it's just so mind-blowing to me. And I'm so grateful for everyone who believes in our mission. There's a cyber defense media group, and I just wrote a really interesting article about end-of-life e-recycling, which is something interesting for healthcare, personal health information, protecting digital medical devices, and what happens when you throw out your phone or return a TV to Best Buy or a computer and things like that. So with that in mind, I just want to say thank you again for your time and for being real life superheroes. And this is a new character. It's never too early to say thank you. Meet the cyber turkey. Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.